She'll here with Sirius Taurus Moon, and this is Mercury Day. Venus, our Mercury Day. Venus is 18 degrees. Libra in the 11th house. And ascendant is suicidal in the midheaven, suicidal in in Virgo. Midheaven is suicidal in Virgo, or explosive. Vertex is 2020 in Cancer. Amazing, because I want to talk about the fact. Yeah, that's Lord of Fortune. We are 2 meters from a lunar eclipse, and my mother fatherland and mother fatherland are fighting again. Um, and this is where Netherlands chose the other governor. And then there was the guy that makes everybody works together. Now he's in NATO and absolutely needed there. And then um, yeah, people said all kind of things when I said it's absolutely needed there, but somebody that can make people work together is absolutely needed at this time. Um, and then there was the government that outthrew Israel for the settlements. Um, and now Israel decided to pay back, so they outthrew Netherlands from the weapon deals, from the Trump weapon deals. How do they call it in Kiryat Gat? Netherlands didn't like the idea and said that they are spiraling, that Israel-Netherlands relations are spiraling downwards. And this brings me to think, well, first of all, as an astrologer, but also as a half Israeli, half Dutch. What's actually happening? First of all, here are the upsides. And the upside is Netherlands is going to have to deal with its problems outside of Israel. Meaning, now that they are tending to blaming everything on Israel, when they won't be able to anymore, they're going to have to tend to the fact that, say it's 30 years to, let's say, the Trudeau's years. You got to say that's Israel, but is it? Yeah, not now. Not now. Recording. Secondly, Israel is going to have to relax its, or to reality check its relaxed notion about the Netherlands. As a person that was abused for having a Dutch surname in Israel, because it evoked all the weird archetypes that I didn't even quite know, because what I knew was from my parents that were married for 14 years, and what people have in mind is usually very far from what I know. So it's a very existentially weird position to be in. I used to laugh about the fact that I don't smoke like anything, including cigarettes. Um, and I said I'm a useless Dutch in that sense. But this is where I take a look at it astrologically. And astrologically, first of all, we're about to have a Saturn ruled lunar eclipse. So this is Rao in the 8th house of the 1800 chart of Netherlands, meaning tending to the things swiped under the rug. And now, of course, when Israel has been accused of genocide, it's difficult to choose a pro-Israeli candidate At the same time, how many of those that were accused in The Hague, or the judges that were accused in The Hague for sexual boundary violation in minors, um, how many of them were actually, doing that in Israel or with Israelis? For the good of all, like that being exposed is not a bad thing. Um, for Israel, it's in the fifth house of children, particularly the first child. And it's co-present with Pluto, which is cult-like societies, A-bombs, and Samson option, um, and all things related to, let's say, the Epstein dossiers, but also the sacrifice of the first child or trafficking, if there are families in Israel that were doing that. Both the 1800 chart of the eighth house of death and shared resources and the fifth house of children with Pluto in it could be taboos around occult practices to do with death, children, resources allocation, oil, and nuclears. Now, because of Aquarius, it can be oil and gas. This is the first thing that comes up, and I said, Rahu in the eighth house of a country, eclipses, is basically that country tending to everything swept under the rug. So the first thing they're tending to is like, well, their relationship with a country that's being accused of genocide. Now, once they tend to that, it's kind of like, if you think about a wound that has some muck in it, some of it is dry, and then one removes the dry part. So maybe the dry part was Israel. Netherlands has issues with femicide that have to do with ritual abuse and secret societies that have to do with oil and gas companies and banks. And that have to do also with drugs mafia and wealth families or crime families, traditions, history all the way back to the Inquisition when everybody had to convert bloodlines and origins, or the obsession with bloodlines and origins that is shared by wealthy Jewish bankers, let's say. So now there's another question. Is the so-called quarrel between Israel and Netherlands, how should I say that, only for the media or not? I don't know to answer that question. The local question is, of course, what do people that live, let's say Israel is living in Netherlands, Dutch is living in Israel. There was also something to do with the banking in Europe in general, which was the necessity to open a bank account and pay taxes also outside of the country. And up until, that is starting from 2027. When they tried to do that in Israel, we had the Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin resignating because his wife Leah Rabin had an external bank account. I don't know what I think about it fiscally. Probably has its pros and cons. In general, I think that necessitating people to have a local bank account and banning them from having an international one is financial violence towards civilians. Now, of course, people need to have the minima to have an international bank account, which, to be very honest, I don't know
So one could say that before we talk about financial violence in the people that are able to do international offshore banking, we need to take a look at the local ones that can't. And in that sense, Europe has a card going for it. They will just have to show that they allocate it to public housing or making private housing so affordable that a person that cannot open a bank account can afford it. Like it is going to have to be something that drastic because the people are definitely going to demand that. Um, Mind you, the pro-Israeli candidate was talking about Netherlands coming back to Netherlands and addressing the locality not from the fiscal restriction point of view or taxation point of view, but from wanting to um, unite with the Flanders and deport Islam. Now, the deportation of Islam on the account of the way they treat women, of course, spiked a wave of femicide for 3 years in Netherlands, not only by Islam-related people. There are notable cases, notable interviews, children that lost their very Dutch mother to femicide by the very Dutch father. And there may be even litigations of people that no longer reside in Netherlands that had faced death threats along the years from a Dutch person, husband or ex-husband. So any type of making people decide between passports could result in mass class litigations on that account, particularly when people see that femicide is a Netherlands problem and not just a familial problem. Because when we get to the roots of femicide, it's a part of secret society involvement, and then the state should basically be the addressee of the door to exit violence. This is, of course, not just true to Netherlands, and this is another one of my predictions. We are going to see, just like when two people divorce and they have a quarrel, all the stuff is exposed about, and we're going to see that when Netherlands has something that was swiped under the rug, it's like, wait a second, doesn't Israel have ritual abuse and femicide too? It's like, yeah, absolutely. Well, shouldn't Israel be class litigated and so on and so forth? Yeah, absolutely. So Israel could dodge, let's say, a genocide class litigation, but face a class litigation against the state for state violence, which basically brings domestic violence, relational violence, business violence, and so on and so forth. There's the notion of children and estrangement that I saw. And then, of course, it's kind of like an Israel issue. Oh, a lot of children dealing with estrangement. And then it's like, well, doesn't Netherlands have that too? Well, yeah, it could have. Another thing notwithstanding is, of course, the sexual boundary violations. Ritual abuse basically is what's behind globally stuff like red light district, for example, and that was either coping mechanisms of those that didn't have a way to die, and indeed in countries like Netherlands or Belgium, we see unaliving for psychological reasons when the psychological reasons are absolutely ritual abuse in all cases. 5% of the women died as a result of ritual abuse, sexual boundary violation in Netherlands in the past 3 years. Now, in Israel, let's say they couldn't die, so what did they do? In Israel, the only access to ending life would be treason in the state. And the telos or trajectory of a person who is constantly being abused, not even knowing what is happening with them or why, is that they may find it, oh, somebody used them to make treason in the state and try to put it on them. And I'm like, well, if Israel is going to unalive, let's say, these people, then it will be susceptible to both genocide and democide litigations. Um, or alternatively, it will have to deal with the fact that its own intelligence and police were involved in human trafficking. Epstein dossiers, Detroit dossiers. So both countries have a lot of stuff to deal with, let's say. Mars is applying, will be going through the ascendant of Netherlands 1800 chart. This is a day chart, and so that can be causing some sort of conflict either within the country, and since the moon is around Beta Persei, it will affect the people. But this is a small transit, it's something like a month or so, and Venus is about to go through Spica and the ascendant of Israel. Again, even if Israel tends to the violation of the feminine, now there's going to be a lot of the effect of too little too late. And to fix that, it would have to do a massive step. Do I actually see something that's a massive step to correct things? Well, at this point, I don't see anything particular on Spica. There is a trine from Rahu that is slowly applying, but I don't, the eclipse axis is left Libra and Aries, and it would look like it would come more from the Deneb Al-Gadi wealth redistribution type of thing, which can result in the persecution of the type of secret societies that were, let's say, passing women or girls around, or boys as the feminine. Now, Uranus is in ninth house of Israel, which is both civil war, but something that has international correlations, as we see with Netherlands. It's very much a civil war with Netherlands, okay? Israel is in Netherlands, Dutch is in Israel. It's pretty much sister countries. And as per the Dutchies, this is 1800 charts, 12th house. So it has to do with hospitals, jails, can be the ICC, okay, the risk of people being jailed for genocide, sparking a conversation, or the risk of people being jailed for assisting Israel, sparking a conversation, and again, to authentically tend to basically the rights of the feminine, not just women, but the feminine, is something that is necessary at all types of conflicts. It's kind of like it's a tautology. Saturn in the 10th house of Netherlands give us a little bit of a fixing the room when the room is the Tweede Kamer. Okay, basically fixing the room when it comes to the leaders, the government. Of course, that includes monarchy as well. And Saturn here can bring either restrictions, litigations, separations, okay, as Netherlands trying to separate its support from Israel's settlements, and then Netherlands talked about the settlements, and then as it was expelled, it basically begins to perhaps consider more steps. Neptune in the 10th can denote as some global effects affecting Netherlands and Netherlands affecting the world, but it can also mean at a certain isolation. Now that we're talking about an exit, what would that mean fiscally? If I take a look at the Brexit, the pound was weakened, not so much in the face of the dollar, but definitely in the face of the euro. Even with the decline in the value of the euro. Now, of course, there are plans to change the currency altogether, which can create a lot of volatility in the in-between phase. Chiron in the 8th house of Israel. Chiron in the 8th house. 8th house is a fixed house. So Israel used to have something fixed to rely on until 2018. And 2018, Uranus went through the 8th house of Israel. So think about the many elections that Israel had. Chiron is a different action in that 8th house. It is the wounded healer. It is the wounded healer. Now, 8th house is occult, is shared resources, is hidden wealth, is the cooperations, the intimate diplomatic relations that are unseen. I remind you, at 7th October, I made a joke that I said a certain candidate should wear a BB called Ruth and not me when it was 7th October because BB called the caretaker prime minister back then. Before he notified the people that there is a war, and that was a move. Now that person is now head of NATO. That's Mark Rutte, and so that little quarrel is likely to affect NATO, and yet Mark Rutte is also the person that made everybody be able to be working together, even in the face of gruesome disagreements. So, is there another person that can make people work together to that level of effectivity in those times? People are going to say, yeah, Jan Stolberg. Well, Jan Stolberg did not face the challenges that Mark Rutte faces today. And as an astrologer, I can say Jan Stolberg did not face the bisextile. I'm not saying he had an easier job, but he did not face the bisextile and the aftermath. Jan Stolberg did not need to deal with Pluto in Aquarius, which is basically the persecution of the Masons or the Templars. Back to Chiron in Taurus for Israel. Rothschild and Rockefeller. Okay, the banking elite, the hidden resources elite, who funded. How does the occult treat women in Israel? And let me tell you that, not anywhere near good enough. I can say if we're dependent on that, it's probably going Samson option for the world. Why for the world? Because the right to exit violence need to be there. And if it's not there globally, it means it's not there globally. If it's not there globally, then it's Samson option. Um, now, um, why the feminine? Because it's a Venus sign. What's at stake? Fixed earth. What does it mean, fixed earth for Israel? Its existence. Yeah, folks want to exist. Women need to exist in their body, heart, mind, and soul aligned. Can't happen with sexual boundary violation. Can't happen with financial violence. Can't happen with spiritual violence. Can't happen without without every woman having her own land safe and free. In fact, Israel needs to be a territorial matriarchy at the very least to sustain. In the many years that Israel had public housing, which we call the Demei Mafteach, in the past, homeless in Israel meant a person that doesn't have their own owned house. I remember when I was at Facebook, there was a lady that said that she's homeless, and then people didn't understand her. They said, but she said she's homeless, why does she need help with the rent? And she was an older lady, wasn't that older, and she was like speaking into terms that she knew. That was something that assisted Israel to sustain. Meaning, as long as every woman had a house where she wasn't raping, where she wasn't violated, where it was independent of her ability to work, then Israel could sustain. The minute we deteriorated that, basically the multiple existential things cut off, but you couldn't deal with we couldn't deal with the manufactured existential threats, because we actually have to appease the eighth house. And when the eighth house is, now here's the thing, the ruler of ascendant is also ruler of the eighth house. Ascendant is in Libra, but Taurus is fixed land. Taurus, we talk about territorial matriarchy at the very least. If it was Libra, for example, appeasing Libra is the declaration of independence where legally, okay, what is the freedom of vocation? It basically means that if there's sexual boundary violation, it violates the freedom of vocation. Basically, I can shut down an entire industry because somebody sexually harassed somebody there, and I would be okay by the Declaration of Independence of Israel. Why? Because that industry can only exist where there's no rape, there's no violation, there's no abuse. And because of the inherent nature of sexual boundary violation that affects the ability to gather evidence, I would not need evidence. Because the right of the public to know takes precedence over literally anything else. Any twist of that law is already an illegal law. An illegal law is already crime against humanity punishable by death. Thank you. Oh my God. Mama. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe. And of course, the respect of the person and their freedom. Basically, any Epstein dossiers related to Israel annihilate the existence of the state of Israel. Like you could literally drop, I'm here in Israel, you could literally drop a series of A-bomb on us today and it would not be a crime against humanity. Why? Because there was violence. That means the respect of the person and their liberty. If we didn't say it in the Declaration of Independence, would it still be true? Of course. That's the holistic meaning of Aries. That's Neptune Aries. Why do we have a concept of illegal law? It's an acknowledgement that a law cannot be illegal. When is a law illegal? When it negates the right of the individual. Can we decide that some individuals are entitled to or some not? Well, the United States tried. How did it work? Ferguson, Rosa Parks, and they all won. So the legal fact is Libra. The territorial fact is Taurus. For example, let's talk about shadow work as a woman. I did not perceive that I need to have my own land, territory, to recover from sexual boundary violation. I had no idea. I didn't trust the law to protect me, but other than that, I had no idea that a part of the recovery is connecting with the land, eating from the herbs that are growing naturally, and that the land and me have a connection in a fertility. And fertility is not about just having children or physical children. I did not make that connection at all. Even though I have Sun and Venus in Taurus, I wasn't particularly materialistic. It was only through the spiritual and through the spirit of matter connection that I understood, okay, that's something that I actually need. Because I have Ketu in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius can be a little bit, it's a fire sign, but it's a fire that expands. And a fire that can expand can actually burn land. That's why it's in conjunct with Taurus. So, for Netherlands 1800 chart, that would be the 11th house. So Chiron going through the 11th house, Netherlands citizens used to be citizens of the world. Now with the isolation in the 10th house, there's something weird about it, and that weird becomes public. Whether it's in the content creation of people like Double Dutch, or I just saw a sitcom of a person, not sitcom, a stand-up of a person who talks about traveling with a Dutch passport everywhere, and said it's usually not a problem. In United States, they expect a mutual drug deal at the border, but they can't say it. But who are the drug lords? Moroccans, but can't say. I mean, they allocate it to someone else. Now, when they think to deport them, so. By the way, in Israel, they found out that the people at the airport were changing uniforms in the bathroom with the Georgian mafia. And then the head of the Georgian mafia in Caesarea was assassinated. Like, I had no idea we have such good relations with Batumi. So, um, what Netherlands is known for is going to be remediated, but also addressed. It's going to be a wounded healer about the 11th house, and it can be the allies, and it can be allies. How should I say it? Allies and enemies, but in a more group setting type of arenas. So any groups that Netherlands is a part of. For example, Netherlands was expelled from a certain, basically, weapon dealing group. To, to be exact, that the Trump arranged in Israel in Kiryat Gat. It's a weapon dealing group. I mean, what? How should I say it? Expo and how does that, for example, affect NATO? Because the United States is still a part of NATO. How does that affect the dividends of Netherlands if something goes through NATO? I, um, nothing. I'm thinking in the back of the mind what kind of essential oil would be fit for for that. Something rounding. Valerian. And Angelica, because um, I don't know if somebody takes Comadine, then not. But Rao is leaving the ninth house of Netherlands, so now Netherlands is going to be having the nodes of the moon. We're going to have a lunar eclipse in the ninth house, so something that will affect the people more, and indeed, people both fiscally and diplomatically having to consider or reconsider the citizens of the world status is kind of weird. Now, of course, they will blame it on Israel. Um, and to which, of course, and then we may find out strange things like, is Israel behind the red light district in Netherlands? Is Netherlands behind the child training hospitals in Israel? Um, More 11th house things. 11th house is also dreams and goals. So in a country's chart, it can be, for example, rethinking how we work with the North Sea, or building an island, building another island that's supposed to be protected by the North Sea, or protected from the North Sea. The risk of flood while having a famine. Chiron here brings the wound and perhaps its resolution. Now, any Chiron Venus means we need to honor the feminine in a more embodied way, or find a way, an embodied way to honor the feminine. In a sexual boundary violation is basically dishonoring the embodied part of the feminine, whereas in Libra, it's dishonoring representation. So, and we need both. For example, dishonoring the embodied part challenges communication, which challenges representation. Which is why the inherent nature of sexual boundary violation is different when we talk about due procedure. Um, so we covered Chiron, we covered the eclipse axis. 11th house Ketu in Israel. Israel will be saying goodbye to some of its memberships or groups it has been partaking in as well, whether by volition or not. And in the beginning, those groups are of Maghan nature. So Israel might be looked at differently with monarchies, or Israel might say goodbye to certain monarchies. Indeed, Israel has expelled Netherlands, which is both a government and a monarchy. But Ketu is about to go on Israel's Mars, which is also both intelligence and military. That can denote many things. I think in 2007 it denoted the small war that was there, but also certain practices of the army. And indeed, there is a plan to have another series of wartime with Iran. Netherlands, this is second house Ketu, meaning that Netherlands is going to have to rely on cooperation more than self-sustaining, becoming an autarkic economy right now. While it might be seen as a comfort zone, is not where Netherlands is set to go. Although this eclipse can mean that Netherlands will have to be a little bit more autarkic in the coming, and indeed we see it fiscally. We see the attempt to restrict the international and offshore banking, which is in the spirit of the eclipse, but it's a very temporary solution. It basically means that Netherlands is going to the comfort zone, but this eclipse does denote of going back to point A or going back to the comfort zone. So it's not something that I would say, oh, it's a bad move. No, it's a temporary move, but we have to remember that it's temporary, because with Ketu, when we stay in Ketu, we soon find out that something happens and we have to go to Rahu. For example, when I was tending to my career or to my studies, things to do with the professional, then eventually I had to tend to home. On my fourth house, I have Ketu in Sagittarius and Rahu in Gemini. The Rahu return, I was in Netherlands. And I had to turn to housing because I simply could not work in Netherlands. I could not. It's simply because of the documents. When I was in Netherlands, I had to make housing first, and then only then I could be. Particularly when I have my own business, then only then I could be working. And of course, I could not work by another person's business before I have all the papers and everything set, except for my passport, of course. Naturally, I did not want to become Arc de Trolls, so this is also why I tended to the fact that the creation of the Trolls and Epsteins is done by violence without ability to exit violence. So, um, more things about this Ketu in the second house. It also means that the skills that are to do with in here, the skills that are to do with the monarchy. It is something particularly that the monarchy or the royal bloodline, or not royal bloodline, but the monarchy is something to do with the religion, because Sun is in the ninth house, or hidden religion or cult religion. There's something there is changing. Something there is, how should I say it? We Ketu, we dematerialize. Um, Sun Pisces can be a philosopher king, but this is where the philosophy of the king could be dematerialized. And here's the thing. Here in particular, I said in previous eclipses with Ketu Magha that Ketu Magha, now I know it triggers a lot of folks, but this is my, okay, this is kind of like, this is my input. It doesn't mean that, let's say, the king or the leader will need to be gone, and so on and so forth. Nor does it help to try to sacrifice anything for the king, because it will only make things worse. We need to see where the sun is. What do we need to dematerialize so not to dematerialize ourselves? Okay, for example, when I had an eclipse with Ketu on my ascendant, that was with Ketu on my ascendant, that was a while ago. Then I addressed the fact that, let's say, attempts to create deed in people are to do with sexual boundary violation. Basically, address the core of those issues, but there was barely a me there to address it because it was so traumatized and tortured. Probably following my thesis in academia. But this is where Ketu here and the sun is in Pisces, meaning what we need to address, and particularly when we're going to have, the sun is going to be in Virgo here, the religion trade aspect of monarchy or leadership. And if we, and now here, Jupiter is pointing us to the past, basically meaning, what do we need from the past to sustain? What have we changed from the past that very temporarily we actually need now? And that can be something to do with fate. It can have something to do with the hidden, let's just say with the hidden occult. I'm sorry, but I saw there was a video about Netherlands once ate their governor. So I'm thinking that either allowing freedom of religion or allowing wealth redistribution that honors, with Leo, Jupiter Leo, we need to honor the feminine, femicide, the femicide, purging the femicide. Because Jupiter Leo, because I'm thinking what from the past, and if I think about the 1200, well, the situation for women in the Netherlands was always relatively better. Now it's not, and we need that from the past to come back to the future. It's kind of like, hey, temporarily we need to tend to that again so that is set and we can move on. Otherwise, they might even purge the king, because the king would become the feminine. The king becomes the feminine in an eclipse. Why? Because now it's a lunar eclipse, but the Ketu is in Leo. And here it is dematerializing the sun. What is dematerializing? Dense matter is yang, is masculine. The dissolution of dense matter, the action is yang. Okay, if you think about something like vinegar, or something like But the dissolving, what is it dissolving to? It creates what? It creates a void. That void is yin. So a great remedy here would be to purge the femicide rather than to purge the king. Now, the occultistic practice, any occultistic practice that was violating the feminine to gain money, to gain resources, or to gain something of the Aquarian nature or hidden resources, or even to pass on karma, must be purged. And it can be that there were new practices that were learned. If those practices, let's say, were learned from Israel, or Israel brought it to Netherlands, then at least for the Netherlands part, they need to purge it. They need to stop using those practices. Remember when I said the problem they had with Israel was the activation because it violates sovereignty? The activation of an agent, which is done by mind control, which is done by, basically mind control can only exist in a framework of a cult. And then with Israel is Ketu on the Mars. So rather than purging its military, for example, people going towards a comfort zone, it's kind of like, oh, we're going to go to war with Iran. Well, that can create mass death of, what is Mars? The military army or the army of the leaders. Now, I don't know, I'm not acquainted with the intricacies within, let's say, the IDF, of where some people would say, oh, it's the army of BBO, or it's the army of this, or it's the army of that. So I don't know, like, to tell which of the different denominations of the military. Now, the military also gotten religious. Israel needs to return to the military being secular. What happened when the military was secular? There were men, there were women. Both of them warriors. Let's say a woman who's serving in the army could be accused in war crimes. Which is, by the way, I cannot, it is basically the why I agreed to not serve in the army. And you say, surely, but this army, for genocide, for this, for that. Well, if you are in the army, you can prevent a genocide. If you are in the army, you can shoot your division. You can do a lot of things with weapons. And that is true to any army. But then if people that disobey legal order are suffering a battle, let's say they are being confined or there's use of the medical system against them, let's say psychiatry, or even the medical system itself, then that needs to be tended to. Now, if we make the army a little bit of a messianic army, which is a little bit of what almost became, then this eclipse shows us that we need to return to the army being secular. It is not God's army. It's the army of the state of Israel. If we want the state of Israel to exist. Now, if people want to return to the past as in the army of King David, Rahu on the guillotine o'clock is a bit of a bad timing. Now, I don't know if there are such plans in Netherlands or something like that, but it's probably irrelevant. Naturally, as all solutions, like I said, I gave the analogy of a wound with gunk. And I said, you remove the dry part, but there's still some wet gunk in it. This eclipse removes the dry part. So it exposes all the gunk in it. For example, if I think about the Me Too. Oh, why would a person even want to be abusive, whether verbally or energetically, towards a TA working by them? Like, I'm not a threat on their career, I'm not a threat on their achievement. I love you. Yeah, amazing. Amazing. I'm still recording. Mama, I'm still recording. No. And then I saw, well, there's something that looks like they have a certain trauma. It looks like they're mind controlled, to be very honest. And then people say, oh, this person's security. I was like, what's security? Mossad! I don't know if it's Mossad or not, but here is the thing. Yeah, this is a testimony for all the legal matters, I don't know. Because it said basically it was committing an irrational act. He was being an irrational player. Now you're gonna love me some more. It was being an irrational player for basically being a bully towards a TA over nothing. Now, it was being an irrational player due to trauma. Well, can that trauma, for example, create a person that does a genocide? Absolutely. 10 years of the backlash of me saying no to whatever wanted there. And I'm okay with Samson option. Of course that could cause a person to do genocide. Good news, you have defense in the ICJ. The difficult news, that's the testimony. Now, is that an Israel problem? Everybody gonna say yeah, but well, they have to behave differently if they say yeah. What's the chart of the moment? What's the chart of the moment? Moment. Al heaven. So, Mercury hour. Mercury in 1 degree Virgo. 2 meters from Regulus. So we have a tiny war teaching. Ascendant 14 degrees Sag. Close to Senate of United States. Sun 3 degrees Virgo. Mars in the 9th house. Trauma of actions that are harming the endocrine system or fertility or creativity. Which was the Me Too. Mercury, 13 degrees Aquarius. More things in the background of those diplomatic relations. Well, Venus is 18 degrees today. I saw this news, I believe today, but they're not from today. So this is a kind of perhaps a toxic diplomatic